千里之行，始于足下。A journey of 1,000 miles begins beneath the feet. We now gather in the Dal to travel the journey together.
Chapter 35 is a relatively short chapter, 9 lines that we were able to analyze and divide into 3 sections. 3 sections of 3 lines each. If you recall, previously, we identified the last section first by highlighting the 3 characters in the middle of line 7, line 8, and line 9, noting that they were the same, and then using that to identify the last section first. Then, judging by meaning, we were able to figure out that section 1, the first 3 lines, were all talking about the great image of the Tao. The great image is an important concept, a significant concept that traces all the way back to the first book on the Tao, the I Ching. There will be a lot more to say about that as we continue. The middle section is addressing the journey of life that all of us are on. So together, these 3 sections make up the body of Tao Te Ching chapter 35. Last time, we were able to get all the way to the very end. And what we did, the strategy that I used was to begin with the great image and then use the chapter line-by-line analysis to build upon our understanding of what it means to hold the great image, which is the first line. So hold the great image can be a very abstract statement, and I wanted to make it more concrete by talking about what it means when you hold the great image of the Tao in your mind. So what we did, and here's there are 8 things that we talked about of what it means to hold the great image of the Tao. And we went through almost all of it last time from 1 to 8. We talked about having this overall perspective. When you hold the great image of the Tao in your mind, you never lose sight of the forest for the trees because you are able to maintain your view of the big picture. Number 2, we talked about how when you hold the great image of the Tao in your mind, that you become a magnet of people, that people will naturally come to you, that they sense you have that overall big picture view. So quite naturally, they want to get directions, guidance from you. So the more you are able to hold the great image of the Tao in your mind, the better you are able to do this. The more naturally people will just come to you seeking advice. And when they do come to you, you are able to be with them and work with them in harmonious peace. And that's the 3rd point. So with the Tao in your mind, you can look at the world through that lens, through the eyes of the Tao. And when you look through the Tao at everything, you perceive that how the Tao is so special, so extraordinary underneath the surface appearance of ordinary everyday things. That's number 4. So number 5, you don't lose sight of the practical, the pragmatic. You look for things that provide long-term benefits. And this is because in the material world, we see plenty of flash and dazzle. We see things that are entertaining, but not necessarily something that is practical, something that provides long-term benefits. The story that I told last time the value of the skill is now on YouTube and can be seen even if you missed the last presentation. We also talked about how the Tao cannot be seen as a flashy performance or demonstration. It can also not be heard. It's not a voice in your head. You can hear the Tao, but what you hear is without sound. So that's number 6. Then we did not get the chance to dive into details on number 7. We ended our discussion at 6. I did a preview of 7 and 8. So the first task today is to talk about 7 and 8 to conclude this overall blue slide on holding the great image of the Tao and what it means to your life. So I now take a step back from presenting all 8 points to just the 6, and then we will build up 7 and 8 as we go. So that's the plan. So the number 8 part has to do with the last line of chapter 35 of the Tao Te Ching. Now we were able to cover the meaning of that, so I present the slide as a complete slide. The original text says, use it, meaning use the Tao. It cannot be exhausted, meaning that it never runs out. It's infinite as a resource. So the bullet points that I have at the bottom reflect that discussion. The Tao is infinite as a resource for us to tap into. It is unlimited. There's a whole bunch of implications on this very simple statement that the Tao is infinite and unlimited. If you understand how to tap into the Tao, you will never be poor. Poverty is a shortage of financial resources. Understanding the Tao and being able to tap into it means there will be no shortage ever of any resource, anything you could possibly want. That's one aspect of it, and it touches upon the tangible aspects of the material world. Tangible by material things, material pursuits, material objects, wealth. These are all things within the purview of the Tao as well, because the Tao includes everything. We are not studying the Tao thinking that it applies to spiritual matters, but not to material things. Actually, the Tao is all-inclusive. So yes, when you understand the Tao, it will actually help you become self-sufficient, financially independent, all of that. So this is a rather in departure of all the books out there, all the seminars that talk about building wealth. They have sort of a narrow focus on just material wealth by itself. The Tao, though, sees your entire life as one big thing, and financial aspects are just a part of it. If you are able to succeed overall in practicing the Tao, then applying what you understand about the Tao to everything, including your finance, will result in success in every aspect of life, including the monetary aspect. So that's enough for now about the tangible aspects of the material world. Let's talk about the intangible aspects. So the last bullet point there is about that. Artists who understand how to tap into the infinite Tao will never have their creativity blocked. There's no writer's block to a writer who knows how to tap into the Tao. It came in handy for me when I needed to write my book on 365 days of the Tao. And that book is The Tao of Joy Every Day. So if you think about it, it is not something that is so easy to be able to talk about 365 things and make sure that they are all unique in their own way. I definitely have noticed that when other writers do this, or maybe attempt to do this, that they will oftentimes use fillers, that they run out of ideas, so they put something in that is simple to put together. Maybe I have even seen one particular author leaving a page intentionally blank and leaving that as an exercise for one's meditation. Well, that's just the easy way out. If you are able to tap into the incredible, unlimited abundance of creativity in the Tao, you never need to do that. I didn't need to do it. I was able to come up with substantial thoughts for every day of the year. There were some thoughts that were related, tangentially similar, and that's because that's the nature of the Tao. So many things are linked. But I definitely made sure that I did not repeat myself in that every expression of a similar concept is unique in its own way. So that's one example of tapping into the creativity of the Tao. It happens when you have access to this unstoppable flow of creativity. You never run out of ideas. I did it. I know that it can be done. I know you can do it too. Now, I want to explore further this idea of the infinite Tao. It has implications other than the tangible or intangible aspects of life. And you may wonder, well, what else is there aside from the tangible, material things, and the intangible, the creativity? There's a lot more. Now, when I usually show a slide like this, you know that I'm usually ready to tell a story from the Tao tradition. And sometimes I draw from other wisdom traditions around the world. In this case, though, I want to make it a little bit different. I want to tell you not a fable or a story from the Tao tradition. Rather, I would like to share with you my personal observation over the years, my observation of Tao practitioners at various levels of cultivation. The picture that you're looking at, it's a real place, and it's associated with the person I am about to talk about, who is a Tao master. So as I looked at all the different Tao practitioners at various levels of cultivation, I definitely noticed that there are different levels of spiritual attainment, some higher, some lower. Therefore, these Tao practitioners, some of them are given titles and positions, such as a Tao master. Now, I have seen, as I mentioned, that there are different levels among them, and there are different levels among the people with a particular title. So just because someone is seen or known as a Tao master, that doesn't necessarily mean that they have as much mastery as another person with that same title. It varies. One particular master that I know took on a task that the other Tao masters did not want. What was that task? Well, it has to do with the title that you see here. So in Mandarin, it is Kai Huang. Kai, the first character that you see there, the character to the left, means open. Huang is referring to a barren wasteland. So Kai Huang, to open up wasteland, barrenness, is really just an expression for being a pioneer. So in the cultivation of the Tao, Kai Huang specifically means to blaze a new trail to a place that previously had little or no exposure to the Tao. That when you engage in this work, 开荒, what you do is that you go to that particular place and you share the message of the Tao with the people there. So it's similar to what in the West we will call missionary work, except that the Tao masters don't need to go about it with a missionary zeal. Rather, in the spirit of the Tao, they just make it available. And then they wait for the people who have an affinity to the Tao to come ask them about the Tao. So that's why at the bottom, I specifically put in the Tao pioneer. It's not exactly like a Tao missionary. I wanted to use a different term to avoid that implication. So this particular Tao master decided to become a pioneer of the Tao in traveling to countries where the Tao was not well known, to bring the Tao to people who were not familiar with Tao teachings. So that's the Tao pioneer. Now, as I mentioned, this was not at all a popular task because, well, there was nothing glamorous about it. You have to travel to these places. Sometimes it could be places that are relatively undeveloped. It required a lot of planning, a lot of travel, very challenging work, oftentimes in difficult situations without a lot of support. So there's there's not a whole lot of recognition for this kind of pioneering work because it's not glamorous, because it doesn't make you the center of attention. You don't automatically get a high profile. And this is true no matter what tradition you talk about. It's even the same situation for religions in the West, that missionary work is really a lot of times not given a whole lot of attention. And this meant that one could toil away for years only to end up with what seemed like nothing. So the question is, why did this particular master take on the task when so many others in a similar position with a similar title, they were reluctant to take on the same thing? How is it? And from my observation, I saw that he was able to keep it up for years and years and years, that he's still going strong today, and he never had any intention of stopping and still doesn't. And folks, this particular Tao master is over 80 years old, still has vibrant energy, still very happy and joyous in going about his work. So I'm not the only one who finds this a little bit out of the ordinary. Many other people approach him and ask him questions like, Master, isn't it difficult for you to engage in this kind of pioneering work? Why not remain in a community where the Tao is already well known? Why not be there to receive all the accolades that you richly deserve from decades of Tao cultivation and teaching? And this particular Tao master would always reply in a similar way. He would say, well, everyone seems to think it is difficult work, but I don't see it that way. He said, I see it as richly rewarding, and I'm looking forward to doing a lot more of it. And he was 100% consistent in words and actions. What he said, he meant. He felt incredible joy in doing his work, and it showed. It radiated from him. And his answer did not really clarify matters for most people, because most people were still kind of stuck in their own way of thinking. They did not understand the infinite Dal, or what it meant to hold the great image. Therefore, it didn't make a whole lot of sense to them. But it made sense to me because of chapter 35. I realized that the difference in this particular Dao master is that he very much held the great image of the Dao in his mind. You are changed dramatically when you hold the great image of the mind in your heart, in your mind. It becomes a part of you. It becomes the way you think, the way you look at the world. So the mind becomes expanded by the infinite vastness of the Tao from the image of the Tao that you are holding in your mind. That infinite Tao is what stretches out indefinitely in all directions. When you identify with it by having it within, you think beyond yourself. You begin to see that you are just one individual in the vastness of Tao that contains numerous other individuals. Now, like I said, most people do not understand this particular aspect of chapter 35 of the Tao Te Ching. They are not holding the great image of the Tao in mind. So they were limited in their thinking in terms of the self. That is, they were usually thinking, well, what's in it for me? How can I benefit from a particular situation? Now, people who know 35 and actually practice it, hold a great image, you think beyond yourself to the greater good. So what's in it for me transitions and is expanded into what's in it for us. Or the thinking is changed from what's in it for me to what's in it for everyone. What's in it for the group? What's in it for the team? What's in it for the family? What's in it for the community? And so on. I think you can see how the expansion works. Not just thinking about yourself, but vastly expanded. And on that same note, rather than to contemplate, well, how can I benefit from this? The thinking changes, morphs into how can I serve? How can I help? How can I provide assistance? How can I support others? These all occur naturally when you hold the great Tao in your mind. The vastness of your thinking process has a dramatic effect on the way you experience life. We all know that real life comes with many challenges. We experience this every day. We go through this every day. The challenges don't ever seem to stop. You know, perhaps you fought through particularly bad traffic yesterday. Well, there's bad traffic today. There's gonna be bad traffic tomorrow. So the challenges don't seem to stop. There's, of course, good aspects as well as challenges. There's difficulties, but there's also moments of joy and victory and achievement, accomplishment, happiness, etc. And the thing is, the good, positive aspects never seem to last. Even as you experience joy, you know that it's going to come to an end. Even as you are happy about something, you know it's going to transition away. So this is what Buddhists call dukkha, often translated as suffering, but dukkha as a term can range greatly from pain, misery. By the way, when Buddhists want to talk about great pain and misery, anguish, you know, they will use dukkha, dukkha. They will repeat the term twice to emphasize the suffering aspect. It can also just be an unsettled feeling of imperfection or dissatisfaction. So it can be a light level, low level suffering, or it can be great suffering. So Buddhists have many wise teachings on how to free yourself from all that to seek liberation from suffering by eliminating cravings and attachments, to liberate yourself from the wheel of samsara, samsara meaning the wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. And the purpose, the goal of Buddhism is to attain nirvana and therefore be forever liberated from dukkha, the suffering. In the Tao, there is a different way to look at all this. Cultivators who really understand the Tao have another angle on it. It's not contradictory or opposed to what the Buddhists teach. Not contradictory, just different. They see that, for instance, life will always have some kind of suffering in it. They definitely agree, Tao cultivators agree, that there's good and bad in life and admit that good never lasts. So the Tao master, when he's looking to the pioneering work, he's very much aware of this. There's good and bad in life. There's suffering in life. The key difference is how you feel and experience it. And by it, I mean suffering. How do you feel about suffering? How do you experience suffering? When your thinking is limited to just yourself, which is the way that most people think, you're sort of like a small cup of water. And the suffering you experience is like salt, a lot of salt that's been dissolved into the water in that small cup. It makes that water incredibly salty, very unpleasant, unfit to drink. Now, when you expand your mind with holding the great image of the Tao in your hearts, in your mind, in your thinking, in everything that you do, you expand beyond yourself. You are no longer a small cup of water. It becomes like a vast lake, even like the ocean. The same amount of salt that poured into a small cup made that water undrinkable. That salt, representing suffering, poured into the lake or the ocean has no discernible effect. So the lake, in our example, metaphor, is as beautiful as ever. The water of the lake is as sweet and refreshing as ever. This is why the Tao Master felt so much joy in doing the pioneering work, even though the suffering, the challenges, the difficulties that he encountered were exactly the same as what other people would encounter. But he was a vast, beautiful lake, so it didn't really make a difference. It was still beautiful. This was the secret of the pioneering master. And it's really no secret at all. It is spelled out clearly in the Tao teachings in this chapter for anyone who is ready to listen, for anyone who is receptive. You see the truth in it when, in the past, you found yourself on a mission. And when you had this duty, when you had something that you needed to get done, and it's a goal that you've set in your mind, then the negative things people say, you noticed, don't matter anymore. It bounces right off of you as you proceed to do your duty, to accomplish the mission. It's the same idea. The moment you expand your mind, difficulties begin to melt away. So that's the other great implication of holding the great image of the Tao in your mind. And it becomes number 7 for us in the blue slide that we've been putting together. So here we are. When you feel one with the infinite Tao, you experience life as an absolute joy. This is the Tao perspective on suffering. It's beyond the teachings that I had talked about before to eliminate craving and attachments, to practice, to walk on the Eightfold Path of Buddhism, for instance, in the Tao, it's about holding the great image of the Tao. Very powerful. Now, the last part of this, item number 8, let me get to that. I want to take everyone back to the chapter for just a moment. Then I want to challenge everyone with this question. How can we tie it up? The very last thing we do or should do with every chapter is to be able to understand how the end of the chapter goes back to the beginning, how it's connected. As you can see here, the last line says, use it cannot be exhausted. And you understand now that this is about the infinite Dal, the unlimited Dal, the Dal without boundaries, without limitations. How do you connect that back to the beginning? Hold the great image. Well, one thing you can say right away is that the last line says the Tao is infinite. Therefore, when you hold the great image of the Tao, you are holding the image of the infinite in mind. Okay, so let me highlight some lines. So here's the other implication, the final implication of holding the great image. Notice line 3. They come without harm in harmonious peace. I especially want to focus on the end of it, harmonious peace. So here's what happens. Think about how conflicts occur throughout human history. We fight over things. Why do we do that? Well, for one thing, we fight over limited resources. Think about, for instance, what's happening in the Middle East. The limited resource would be oil. The whole world is dependent on oil for energy, for gasoline in cars, for so many things. Because it's a finite resource, different countries, different factions feel that they need to fight over it because, well, if somebody else gets more, I get less. If somebody else gets all of it, I get nothing. Therefore, I have to stand up for myself and I have to get what rightfully belongs to me. I have to get my share. So this thinking of finite, limited resources is at the root of all the conflicts throughout human history. Now, let's flip it around. What if somehow you understand that no, the resources are not finite or limited. It's quite the opposite. They are infinite. They are unlimited. There's boundless abundance available for everyone. When you begin to think in that way, you realize that there's no need for contention. There's no need to fight over the few remaining slices of the pie. When in the realm of the Tao, you can make the pie as big as you want. So there's plenty for everybody. So that naturally results in line 3, harmonious peace. That's the idea. So now let me take everyone through the bullet points to depict this concept that we have just talked about. First of all, so the question is, how does Tao Te Ching chapter 35 come full circle? And you guys know, I always talk about this, the true understanding of each chapter is always about being able to connect the end back to the beginning. And as I said before, any translation or interpretation or explanation of the Tao Te Ching that does not include this crucial aspect shows that the author has incomplete understanding of the Tao Te Ching. Now, we want our understanding to be complete. So let's go through the bullets. First, in this case, the ending speaks of the Tao as an infinite resource. Use it, it can never be exhausted. That's number one. Now, let's go back to the beginning. Wrap back to the beginning, and you see this infinite nature is a key aspect of the great image you must hold. You must hold in mind. So the great image is the image of the infinite. When you feel this, you naturally move away from contention. Why bother contending? Fight over anything when there's always more of it. So other people that make a power grab at something, they can do whatever they want. You're going to tap into the infinite resource where there's plenty more where that came from. This means life is no longer a zero-sum game where in order for you to win, someone else has to lose. No. Instead, it's all about creating the win-win situation where we can all enjoy the endless abundance together. And here's the key, in harmonious peace. So infinity of the Tao goes naturally, leads naturally to harmonious peace. That's the point. So now we have enough to tie it up and bring in the last point in the 8 implications of holding the great image. And here it is. You realize we can all enjoy the journey together in peace. No need to fight. So that's it. That concludes our discussion on the 8 implications, the meaning of holding the great image. So the great image of the Tao is actually one of the key concepts presented in this chapter. There are other key concepts that I want to make sure that everyone understands. So that's the reason why I have a section devoted to that. Tao Te Ching 35 key concepts. Our purpose highlights the most significant concepts in this chapter. When I say most significant, I'm talking about the number one, the concepts that stand out. Number two, the concepts that echo in other parts of the Tao Te Ching and also in other works of the Tao, such as I Ching, Zhuangzi, etc. Those are the most significant concepts. When you grasp onto those significant concepts, you pretty much have mastered this entire chapter. So let's dive right in and talk about that. Here's the chapter, and the first key concept is the concept that we were just talking about, holding the great image. So what I'll do is that I'll make that red, and specifically I am going to single out 2 characters here. The second character, Da, means big, vast, grand, great, huge, and then Xiang is what we translate as image. So this is a key concept with a number of reasons why. Those of you who have been following this talk, you probably recall that we had a discussion on the abstract cosmology of the Tao. It was using the expressions, the descriptions that are infused into the I Ching from more than 4,000 years ago, and the oral tradition goes back much further than that, perhaps 10,000 years or more. That abstract cosmology walked everyone through a sequence of this abstract creation of the Tao. Everyone was fascinated. It was frankly a fascinating topic. And when we got to one particular point, when we talked about xiang, people were asking to know more, to hear more about it. And I said, well, we will touch upon it again in the Tao Te Ching, and here we are in 35. So this is when we delve a little bit into that as one of the key concepts. You'll see quite a bit of material from the I Ching. Many people have been asking about I Ching as well. So this is a good opportunity. So I'm going to isolate the character xiang. As you know, in this chapter, I translated xiang as image, although the term has no real English equivalent, only approximations. And let me explain. I'm always wary when an author or expert presents a vague description like that. So unless they can back it up, I'm very much inclined to think that they are being vague only because they are unclear as to the exact meaning. Well, I'm going to be very clear. In this context, the image of the Tao is like a representation or reflection, something that follows the pattern of the Tao. When you look into a mirror, you see an image of you. It's a reflection of you. It is something that follows the optical patterns, the patterns made by light bouncing off of you visually onto the mirror and back into your eyes. So it's like that. This term, xiang, is specific to the Tao. It's Tao terminology that goes back a long way. And we're talking more than 4,000 years ago from the I Ching. Now I know many people who are listening and people who will be checking out the YouTube presentation will say I Ching. It's actually I Ching. And no matter how it's spelled, the new spelling, the new standard is Y-I instead of I, and then J-I-N-G instead of C-H-I-N-G. But no matter how it's spelled, it's always I Ching. So in the I Ching, it says this specific thing. Let me show you, and then I will explain. So 太极生两仪，两仪生四象. At the very last character here, you see the exact same character that we're talking about as image, reflection, representation, etc. So what is all this? Well, let's break it down. 太极, the first two characters, take a look at the bottom here. I've got 太极, the supreme ultimate. That's a literal translation of the two characters, the supreme ultimate. You know Tai Chi better as Tai Chi in the West. You know, when people move through a series of motions and poses slowly, sort of like yoga, except everything is always moving. Tai Chi, you see people doing this in the park. You see people do it on television sometimes. It's a great way to exercise, and many elderly people are really into it because it promotes health, mobility, and longevity. Longevity is what I'm trying to say. So Tai Chi Quan, the Tai Chi that we talk about is derived from this term right here. Shen, the character in the middle, means to give rise to, give birth to, etc. Then we get to the two complements. So Tai Chi is the one. It gives rise to the two. The two complements, we usually know them as yin and yang. That is the most common way to refer to the two complements. It's the two complementary dualities. And the two complements give rise to the four xiang. And here I'll just use the word manifestations because it's a word that can include reflections, representations, images. As I said, there is no exact English equivalence. There are approximations. And you are now seeing the most accurate description of xiang available. Now let me explain. Let me explain what this means. The four manifestations, 四象. What are the four manifestations? Why four? So we are now deep in the beginning of I Ching. In the very beginning of the I Ching, it steps everyone through the process of the abstract cosmology of the Tao. So I'm repeating what I had in the previous slide here, but at the top. So here's the question. What are the four manifestations? Well, here's the answer. They are abstract concepts that can represent natural phenomena, such as the four seasons. So four manifestations can mean the four seasons. It can also mean, for instance, the four cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. It can also be the four directions in terms of your movement on land, where you can go forward or back or to the left or to the right. So that's not the same as north, south, east, and west, because depending on which way you're facing, forward and back, east to the left and to the right, can correspond to any one of the four cardinal directions. So the four things, the four aspects. In general, whenever you have a 2x2 matrix, 四象 will naturally be present. So here's an example. Let's take a look. In this table that you see here, this deserves more of an explanation, and I think this is the sort of thing that you will not find in any other book on the Tao Te Ching. Let's look at the columns. You've got yin and yang. So I've got the Chinese characters right next to them. So yin and yang are the complementary dualities. Then they are further categorized as lao or tai versus shao. Shao means young, lao means old, tai means the supreme. So when you combine them, you get lao yin, tai yin, lao yang, tai yang. These are the same. These are synonymous. They're just different names for the same thing in each category. And then you get shao yin, shao yang. So what is that? What does that mean? So this is where the explanation comes in for the four manifestations like this. First of all, let me explain the difference between young and old or supreme. So the idea is that when you are looking at each half of the yin and yang duality, whether it's yin or yang, you see that it can be further divided. You can categorize, for instance, with yin, and think of these as energies. I think everybody's comfortable thinking about yin and yang as complementary energies, positive, negative, active, passive, male, female, stuff like that. So when you are looking at one aspect of the energy, you have further divisions, categorizations. You have instances where the energy is just being developed, starting to be developed. That's the young. then you have the energy at its maximum, at its ultimate, which is the old. So that's why you have these divisions. Shao Yin, that energy when it's still in the beginning phase, and Lao Yin or Tai Yin when that energy has been fully manifested. Same on the Yang side. Now, by coincidence, Tai Yang means the sun. But the whole idea, don't lose sight of the basic idea, is that with Yang energy, you can have a beginning phase when it's starting to manifest. Then you can have the ultimate aspect of it when it has been fully manifested. That is 四象 right there. So just a little bit more to drive home the concept. First of all, recognize that everything's relative. So whenever you divide the one into two, each half of the yin and yang duality can be further distinguished into subdualities. So with yin, you could, for instance, have big and small yin, large yin, small yin. With yang, same thing, large yang, small yang. So another example, you can divide any category pretty much as above average or below average. So above average would be 51 to 100%, below average would be 1 to 50%. So two halves, the big and the small. Then you can further divide, for instance, the above average category, the upper 50, you can divide that into 25% divisions. So the upper category will be 76 to 100%, and then there's also going to be a 51 to 75%. This kind of division and subdivision can go on indefinitely. The process is recursive. Recursive means that it repeats, it reapplies to itself repeatedly. And usually people will say it's iterative and recursive, and that's what it means. That you can divide something into halves and then divide that into quarters, divide it into 1/8, 1/16, 1/32, and so forth, resulting in a universe that can be subdivided infinitely, indefinitely, in fractal geometry. So when you get into things like the fractal nature of reality, well, that's actually one of the implications of this concept, of the four manifestations. So one more slide, then we will be ready to take a break. One more slide to really drive home the first key concept. And that slide is basically to depict the progression that is described in the I Ching, and then we can move on to the second key concept after the break. So in I Ching, we start out with 0, 无极, that's the void, that's the nothingness. It's usually represented by, for instance, a blank piece of paper, the void. It's the void where everything comes from. It's the void that's full of possibilities waiting for manifestation. So from the 0, from the 无极, comes the 1, the 太极. The 太极 is the supreme ultimate. And you have the Chinese characters there. So this is the unity, the oneness of the Tao. Usually, this is represented by a circle. Then we go from 1 to the 2, and from here on, it's going to be multiplication by 2 successively. 2, you know the 2 as yin and yang. So in Chinese, you'll see 两仪, the 2 manifestations, the 2 complements, and then you'll see yin yang, which is the Mandarin characters for yin and yang. Then The subject, what we're just talking about, is what you get when you multiply this by 2, you get to 4, as in the 4 manifestations, 4象. And what happens when you multiply by 2 again? You get to 八卦, the 8 trigrams. And here you have the Mandarin characters for that. It's very literal. That's the character for 8. That's the character for trigrams. It's the same with the other characters. They're very literal. 四象, 4 manifestations. So what happens when you multiply 8 by 2 again? You get to 16, and there's no specific term in I Ching for that. Same with 32, no specific term. You do, however, get a specific term when you multiply by 2 again to the 64 hexagrams. 64卦. And in the Tao Te Ching, the point is made that you go from 8 to 64 because 8 times 8, 8 times itself, is 64. So there you have it. Here we have the progression of the abstract cosmology from the I Ching. Let us explore concept number 2 together. Key concept number 2, you'll see in line 4. And I have highlighted 2 characters there. And the translation, passing travelers. So this deserves some additional coverage and discussion. Passing travelers is a way to talk about how temporary, how transient, how impermanent everything is. So here's the slide on that. What I'll do is that I isolate the 2 characters, 过客, the passing guest. So when we speak of transience and impermanence, these are concepts that are usually associated with Buddhist thinking. But these 2 characters tell us that long before Buddhist philosophy came to ancient China, Tao sages had already developed the concept to talk about that, to talk about transience and impermanence. What is that concept? The concept is that we are not permanent owners of anything. Every one of us is just passing through. We're here today, gone tomorrow. Let me also be careful to note here that the great majority of Tao cultivators believe that when we look at life as a great journey, most Tao cultivators see that this journey is one of many. That is, it's one leg of the journey. That you, as an immortal spirit, you've been on many legs of the journey before, many previous lifetimes, each of which was a journey in the overall journey of the soul. Now, you don't need to accept that, of course. You can also think just in terms of the life that you know about, the one in the here and now. So either you see this lifetime as just the one and only journey, or you see it as one journey out of many, with many more journeys to come. The idea that I'll present here will apply either way. So the basic idea is that even when we think of ourselves as residents in a particular place, like the home where you live right now, even if you think of yourself as the owner, the residents, you live here, you're here permanently, well, in the Tao perspective, it's not permanent. We are more like visitors. From the perspective of the lifetime, you are here now, temporarily on a visit, and you're going to be gone perhaps in decades. So because of that, we're not really owners of anything. Even our physical bodies that we think we own, we're really just borrowing temporarily. Bodies are temporary vessels to facilitate this overall need that we have to explore the material world, to experience things as a physical entity. So 过客, the passing guest, is just about this idea that we're not here permanently, we're here as a guest passing through, and as we're passing through this material world, we're definitely seeing a lot of distractions, a lot of temptations. So noticing these temptations, the sights and sounds, we know that we can be led off the path pretty easily because the distractions are pretty tempting. And that is why we need to focus on the opposite, the Tao itself, which is not transient, which is not impermanent, it's constant, it's eternal. But it goes to the next key concept number 3, which is that the Tao, unlike the sights and sounds, the distractions, the temptations, the Tao itself is plain, it's unexciting. That comes from key concept number 3 from line 6, which is about the Tao being bland and without flavor. So to address that key concept specifically, I want to compare and contrast the Tao and temptations of the material world with the temptations to the left and the Tao to the right. So what can we say about temptations and how is it different? How are they different from the Tao? Well, one thing we can say is that temptations seem exciting, they seem interesting, but they're not necessities. I may be very excited by the latest gadgets, but I know that I can live without them. What about the Tao? The Tao is bland and tasteless, yet essential. Now, of course, I recognize that not everybody understands that the Tao is essential. It is certainly essential to me, but from the Tao perspective, it is also essential to everyone, even when they don't know what the Tao is. And we have more material in this slide to address that. But back to temptations for just a moment. Second question, well, what do we do with temptations? We know how they are. They seem exciting and interesting, but they're not necessities. What do we do with them? Well, second bullet point there is that the temptations are usually pursued, lusted after, and obsessed over. We go after them with a vengeance. What about the Tao? Well, not so much. The Tao is not usually pursued, lusted after, or obsessed over. So think of the Tao as being like water or air. With water and air, usually we take them for granted. We don't obsess over water or air. We don't lust after it. We don't pursue it. It's just there. It's just presence. With temptations, we know the pursuit and lust of temptations has negative consequences. Obsessions over temptations will have negative consequences to life. And we can become addicted to the pursuits, to the lust, to the obsession, and the damage that's possible from the addiction is real. So you can actually quit the temptations and be free of them as if they are an addiction. And some would definitely go further and say, well, that's exactly what they are. They are an addiction. We're addicted to fame and fortune, to things that we can acquire, things that don't really last, but we're addicted to them. So what about the Tao? With the temptations, you can actually quit them. You can stop chasing after them. What about the Tao? Well, like water and air, when you are deprived of them, you quickly realize you cannot be without them. Although you took them for granted, when you don't have them, you quickly realize how much you actually need them. And there's another characteristic about temptations that's worth going over, is that, well, the appeal, the exciting, interesting attraction, it wears off. You can get sick of them after a while. Being stuffed with food, feeling very uncomfortable, hearing a song too many times. This last holiday season that we had, I actually heard quite a few complaints about particular Christmas songs that were being played and repeated ad infinitum. So people were about to go out of their minds from hearing those songs too many times. Seeing beauty fade with age doesn't last. And hearing lies repeated, you get sick of that very quickly, and so on. What about the Tao? Do you get sick of them? Well, think of water and air. There's no getting sick of water and air. Why not? Well, because they're bland and tasteless. There's nothing to get sick over. There's no taste to water, so you can't get sick of the taste. There's nothing. So that is the key concept about the Tao being plain, simple, flavorless, tasteless, bland, unexciting. So now there's key concept number 4. Use it, it cannot be exhausted. So what is that? What does that mean? How do we expand on it? Well, this is related to the story that the personal observation that I shared about this particular Tao master, that when he experiences the infinite nature of the Tao, it expands his perceptions. So here we seem to be back to that same point again, tying it up together. Notice that the first key concept was hold the great image, which was what the blue slide was all about. The 8 points about what it means to hold the great image. Now we are wrapping everything up on the Tao as an infinite resource. So for this one, I would like to go over a mental imagery with you to make sure that this sticks. So I isolated the characters here, which means use it, it cannot be exhausted. So now, here's what I would like to ask everyone to do. Imagine a well in the center of a village. This well has been there for untold generations. So for as long as anyone remembers, that well has been around. It was constructed a long time ago and it's been serving the village ever since. And let me use a picture here to depict that. So the relationship between the villagers and the well is one of need. The villagers depend on the well, and the well has never failed them. Year after year, the well has always provided them with fresh water. So the village, the life of the village is sustained by the water from the well. And no matter how much the villagers draw water from the well, the water level always seems to be the same. It doesn't get higher, it doesn't get lower. The well never runs dry. So I think by now, you know what I'm trying to get at when I'm using this well to talk about the Tao. That the Tao, use it, it's never exhausted. It's like the villagers drawing water from the well, but no matter how much they do that, there is always more. The well never runs dry. There's always water in the well. So utilize this to apply to you. The well is the Tao as an infinite resource. The village is your world. The villagers are you. Okay. Now, this is key concept number 4. We have a total of 4 key concepts that span this particular chapter. Now, the very last thing that we should do is to challenge ourselves to combine the 4 concepts together. Bring the 4 concepts together. And does anyone remember what the 4 concepts were? If not, it's okay. I can repeat. The first of the 4 concepts was the great image. The second key concept was the passing guest. The third concept, key concept, was the plain Tao, the Tao that is bland and without flavor. And the fourth key concept is the Infinite Dal. So looking at the last 2, you see that the Tao, although seemingly plain, is actually unlimited, infinite. So these are the 4 concepts. How would we string them together? How would we stitch them together as an overall thing, as an overall concept? So what I want to do is to challenge you to do that. So there's a few things to keep in mind. Here's the expression of the challenge. Here's the task. See if you can combine the 4 concepts into one. Make it a narrative. Make it a narrative that links all 4 together as a coherent thing. Now, to do that, you can change the order of the key concepts in any way that makes sense to you. You can combine some of the key concepts together into one thing. You can switch them around, whatever makes sense, whatever works for you. So literally, this exercise, there's no right or wrong way to do this. There's no better or worse. The doing of the exercise is the point. So once you've had a chance to do this, I want to invite everyone to do this yourself. At the very end of our time together today, we'll look at one way to do it, and we'll make that our summary for this entire chapter. Okay, so with that, we're done with our discussion on the key concepts of 35. This means we are now ready to talk about the paraphrase. So our purpose in the paraphrase is to demonstrate complete understanding by expressing the original meaning with modern language. So let's get into that. We have the 3 sections. We'll do them one at a time. Section 1, hold the great image, all under heaven will come. They come without harm, in harmonious peace. How would we depict that as a paraphrase? here's what I would like to suggest. If you hold the great image of the Tao in mind, it will guide you in everything you do. It will bring your words and actions into alignment with the Tao, which in turn brings people into alignment with you. Their interactions with you will be positive and constructive. If they join you in your work, they will be able to assist you in a spirit of peaceful harmony. So this paraphrase captures the great image of the Tao. The alignment with the Tao brings about the alignment with people, which is why all under heaven will come, meaning people will come to you, ask you questions, seeking advice, etc. And they will be constructive and positive. That's the nature of your interactions with them. This covers the parts where it says they come without harm. The purpose is positive. And lastly, we have emphasis on harmonious peace. And that's because when they are with you or perhaps working alongside you, they can do so in that spirit of peaceful harmony. So this is already by itself a good reason to hold the great image of the Tao in mind. And as we have seen, there's a whole bunch of other reasons to do the same thing. Next, in section 2, we have music and food, passing travelers stop. The Tao that is spoken out of the mouth is bland and without flavor. So how do we bring that into a form like the paraphrase? You are a traveler in the journey of life. As you pass through the material world, you often come across temptations, like the sound of music or the smell of food that invite you to stop for a while. The Tao, compared to such attractions, seems completely unremarkable. It is bland and tasteless, like water or air, and it does absolutely nothing to attract attention to itself. Oftentimes, people will ask, how come this wonderful philosophy of the Tao is not more well known in the West? Well, to practice the Tao correctly, you have to also be like the Tao, not attracting attention to yourself. So the temptations covers the music and food that we have here. These are the enticements for the passing travelers, the guests, to stop and investigate and experience that. The danger is that the passing travelers will then forget where they were going or be lost. When they investigate the attraction, the temptation, but then come up empty, they may not be able to find their way back. So that is both the attraction and the danger of music and food representing temptations in the material world. Whereas the Tao is quite the opposite. Bland and without flavor, does not attract attention to itself at all. Then, in the last section, we talk about that even more specifically by saying, look at it. It cannot be seen. Listen to it. It cannot be heard. Use it. It cannot be exhausted. So let's bring that into the format of the paraphrase. When you look at the Tao, you see nothing colorful or flashy. Indeed, you see nothing at all. When you listen to the Tao, you hear no words or commandments. Indeed, you hear nothing at all. It is only when you use the Tao that you sense something is different. It never runs out because it is unlimited. And you also become unlimited when you understand how to tap into it. So there we have it, the paraphrase for 35. This concludes our discussion of chapter 35 today. So we are going to get into the summary now, and then we will be able to end our talk on 35 earlier than usual. Summary. As I mentioned, I will provide an example of one way to string the 4 key concepts together into one narrative. And the invitation for everyone is to try that yourself, to do it on your own. There's no right way or wrong way, as I mentioned, no better or worse. Now, just as a reminder, what were the 4 key concepts? Does anyone remember? Here's what they were. Key concept number 1, 大象, the great image. Key concept number 2, 过客, the passing guest. Then we have key concept number 3, the plain Dal, the Dal that is without flavor, that is bland. And lastly, the infinite Dal, the Dal that cannot be exhausted, is unlimited, goes on forever. Okay, so to conclude and summarize this chapter, let me present one way to unify the 4, to combine the 4 together. So first, think of our lives as a great journey. At the moment, you and I have the good fortune of traveling together. So this is to say we're travel companions. And as we go about our lives outside of the Dao meeting, this weekly Dao meeting, we encounter other people, and they too become our travel companions in the journey of life. So you can look at this in a variety of different ways. It's a great honor and privilege for me to be able to share part of the journey with you. Of course, I don't know how long we're going to be able to travel together. I just cherish what we have right now. I'm very grateful for what we can do together, talk about together. So this is the beginning of the narrative, our lives as a great journey, and we're all in it. You and me, we're in it together. Then we are all passing through the material world on this great journey. And as we do so, as we're passing through it, we are definitely noticing all the sights and sounds. Isn't that true? Think about the lives that we have. Think about everything that we encounter throughout the day. There's all the advertising that we come across. Definitely the sights and sounds. There's all the entertainment, all the options, all the distractions. So I think you can see why I chose the caravan at the bottom to be symbolic of the journey. So as the caravan is making its way through the desert, it can see off in the distance an oasis, or possibly just a mirage. So that's the second one. Then, as we notice the sights and sounds, we're also remembering the words of a wise teacher, Lao Tzu. And because of that recollection, we bring the great image of the Tao to mind. And another way to say it, of course, is the image of the great Tao, either way. And this helps us deal with the temptations and the distractions. So the image of the great Tao, it is infinite, but it seems plain and ordinary. It provides us with everything we actually need. The temptations, the sights and sounds actually do not, but the Tao does. And the Tao is unlimited, so it turns out to be our one great infinite resource. So I hope that this gives you a Tao perspective on life itself. That's the great gift of Tao Te Ching chapter 35, is to give us that perspective, and at the same time also telling us to hold the great image of the Tao in mind, that it's a practice that has many powerful benefits.
Our meeting has come to an end, but the journey continues on. Let us travel safely. Until next time, may the Tao fill you with peace and happiness.